Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rebecca Keppel. Today's video is another episode of new and must-have crafty supplies, but this one is Halloween style. So for today, I have a bunch of new stamps, dies, and a stencil from Simon Says Stamp, illustrated and designed by CZ Designs. They are bold and graphic and just lots of fun to use. While I was shopping for those Halloween supplies, I also added to my cart the new Distress Oxide color from Holtz, Crackling Campfire. So of course I'll show you all these new products and we'll use them in 3 different Halloween cards today. Be sure to stick around to the end because I have a fun way to use Tonic Studios Nouveau drops over a stencil. I love doing these videos to share new supplies so that you can check them out before you buy them. If you want to see more product reviews like this, be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell so you can be notified anytime I have a new video available. But for now, let's jump right into Halloween must-have crafty supplies. First up, let's take a look at that new Distress Oxide color. For those of you who've seen this video, you know how much I love Distress Oxides, and this new color is a great addition to the Oxide family. If you've already watched my 8 reasons why I love Distress Oxide video, you know I love to stamp with oxides. So let's stamp out this new color and then see how it compares to others in the Oxide family. I'm using a cute bat stamp from the Halloween People stamp set, which I'll share more about later. As soon as I stamped it out, I knew I was going to love this color, Crackling Campfire, and I was pretty sure it wasn't really like any of the other colors I have. But to be 100% sure, let's compare it first to Ripe Persimmon, then to Carved Pumpkin, and then finally to Spiced Marmalade. And you can see it's nothing like these other colors. I didn't compare it to the reds that I own, but this color definitely has more orange brown in it than any of those. So it's completely unique new color, and I'm happy to have added it to my collection. So now let's see how it blends. I'm working on my Waffle Flower Water Media Mat, which is my favorite surface to use for ink blending, and I'm using one of the Holtz foam blending tools because I want full coverage and a completely opaque look for this background. I love this color, especially for fall and Halloween cards. Next, I grabbed some Distress Oxide spray in Squeezed Lemonade, and I removed the nozzle and tapped droplets all over the panel, and love that the yellow can sit on top of this new color. Next, I grabbed the Dina Wakley Media Gloss spray in white, which is my favorite white spray, and I did the same thing, removing the nozzle to tap droplets all over the background. And I'm going to set this panel aside to fully dry. Now that we've created that awesome Crackling Campfire background, let's bring in some of the CZ Design products, starting with the stamp set Halloween People and adding in the sentiment strips. First, I'll share all the products I bought from Simon Says Stamp, starting with the bat dies, which includes 2 layerable bat dies, the main shape with the cutout eyes, and the shadow layer. You can create some really fun effects with these. Next is a ghost in a circle, which cuts a ghost in a partially die-cut circle. I'll share later what this looks like when it's die cut out. These are the Halloween sentiment strips. If you caught my last new and must-have crafty supplies video, you know I am loving these strips a lot these days to really speed up my card making. Next is the Just BATTY stencil. I can imagine a ton of fun different mediums with this stencil to make some really cool backgrounds, and I'll share one later in this video. Last up, I grabbed the Halloween People stamp set, and I decided to get the matching dies for this too. I love the bold fonts and fun sentiments, and having a stamp version of the bat and ghost that I can also die cut out. To complete a card for the splattered ink blended background I created, I'm using some Canson Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Grid Line Transparency in my MISTI to help me line up the sentiment that I want to stamp in the center of the card. Simply place the transparency over the card and place the stamp over the transparency. Close the door of the MISTI to pick up the stamp, remove the transparency, and have it perfectly lined up. I'm using VersaFine Black Onyx ink for this because I want to heat emboss, and since it's a pigment ink, it will take a long time to dry, and I'll have time to pour the embossing powder on it and have it stick to that ink. I will stamp it multiple times to get full coverage, and then I'm going to pour fine, clear embossing powder on top, and then heat set it until all the powder is melted and the stamping appears shiny. I'll continue to stamp the candy corn image from the Halloween people multiple times and add the embossing powder and heat set it until they are all over the background to create a cute candy corn pattern. I'm going to watercolor the candy corns with Tombow Markers, so I'm going to use a piece of Waffle Flower's palette paper to protect my water media mat from staining. I'm going to use Tombow's 905 and 055 to color the orange and yellow parts of the candy corn, and I'll just leave the tips white. I use my Distress spray to spritz a little bit of water on my palette paper. I'll use the orange Tombow to add a bit of color to the orange stripe, and then I use a very fine paintbrush to pick up a bit of water and blend out that color. I don't need to use watercolor paper for this because we're using such a tiny amount of water. The Bristol paper actually helps the Tombow's ink move really easily and blend it out. I wasn't sure if the yellow would be too bright, so I decided rather than going direct paper that I would scribble some of the yellow on the palette paper and then spritz it with water and pick it up with the brush. But it turns out that it was way too light that way, so I went back to direct to paper and used the yellow water to blend it out. After finishing up coloring all the candy corns, I thought it would be cool to take advantage of the "or" in the sentiment that is an open font and color that too. The nice thing about working with the heat embossed images is that they create kind of a wall that keeps your color inside, so you get less bleeding outside the lines. I trimmed down this panel so it would have less white space on the edges, and to pop this panel up, I decided to cut a piece of white fun foam just a bit smaller than the panel, and then added a bunch of tape runner to the back of the panel and placed it on the fun foam to adhere it down. Then I added tape runner to the center of the blended background and placed the panel on top. It's easier to add tape runner to paper than it is to foam, which is why I adhered it this way. I trimmed down my sub-sentiment from the Halloween sentiment strips and added some tape runner to the back and added it under the stamped sentiment to complete this card. For the next card, let's bring in the ghost in a circle die and create a fun little shaker shape right in the middle of the card. As you can see, the ghost in a circle partially die cuts out the cutest little ghost in a partially die cut circle. You could layer this over some colorful cardstock to complete the look, but instead I decided to grab a slightly larger circle die from my stash to completely cut this out from the cardstock. Next, I used the same circle die to cut out some fun foam and placed the ghost die in the center and cut that out as well. So now I have a circle cardstock ghost and one from fun foam too. For the window, I'm using the Studio Katya acetate sheets and cutting it out with the same circle die, but not the ghost this time. Next, I'll take some liquid glue and place some on the back of the cardstock die cut. I spread it around with my finger because I really don't want any coming out of the side and ruining the clear look of the acetate. I placed the die cut down on the acetate circle and then set it aside to dry. While the window is drying, I'm going to work on the rest of the panel. I'm using the negative piece of acetate out of which we cut the circle window as a mask, and I'm ink blending Twisted Citron Distress Oxide ink with the darkest part of the blending in the center of the circle and getting lighter as I work my way out. Once I know where the center is, I can remove the mask and make the lighter parts of the ink blending extend further away from the center point, which will give it a glowing effect. In order to keep the center the darkest point, I always start my blending there and then lighten how hard I'm pressing down as I continue to move towards the outside. Then I'll place the panel in my MISTI and once again use the grid transparency to line up the sub-sentiment. I have the ghost on the panel just for placement to see where I want everything, but I'll take it out before inking up my stamp with Gina K Amalgam ink. Next, I'm going to treat some purple cardstock with anti-static powder and ink up the main sentiment with Versamark ink. I pour plenty of white embossing powder on top and heat set it with my heat tool to melt all of the embossing powder. I'm going to use the matching dies to cut out this sentiment, so I'll temporarily adhere the die with purple tape and run it through my die cut machine. Now it's time to create the shaker, so I'll add some liquid glue to the foam ghost die cut, making sure to have a full line of adhesive all the way around the circle to keep the shaker goodies trapped inside. I also placed glue on the ghost as well because I wanted to keep the shaker goodies from getting in the ghost's eyes and mouth. I place the ghost right in the center of the ink blending so that the darkest color is behind the ghost's face, and then it looks like the rest of it is glowing. I'll set this aside to dry. Once it's dry, I added some sparkling confetti to the frame outside the ghost. The iridescence of the confetti goes along so well with the glowing look of the ink blending. I'm not worried about anything outside the circle at this point, but I do want to make sure nothing is inside the ghost's eyes or mouths before I seal it up. I flip the window over and place liquid glue behind the cardstock on the acetate, again making sure the glue is all around the circle and the ghost, but none of the clear spots. I place the window down on top of the foam and slide it into place. It's most important that the ghost be all lined up. The circle outline might be a little bit off, but as long as the ghost is all lined up, the circle part doesn't matter as much. While that's drying, I place a few foam squares on the back of the die-cut sentiment and place that above the shaker. I decided I liked the look of some of the shaker goodies outside the shaker, so I added a few small drops of liquid glue all around the card and sprinkled some of the iridescent confetti on top, and then set that aside to dry. Then I just need to tap off any excess, and this card is done. For this last card, we're going to combine the Just BATTY stencil with the BATTY dies. Check out how awesome flock and foil look together with that bat, and then wait until you see how cool Tonic Studios Nuvo Drops looks over a stencil. To start this card off, I'm going to ink blend several colors of Distress Oxide ink. I started with Mustard Seed, then I moved on to Carved Pumpkin. Next, I am going to use Ripe Persimmon. And then finally, I'm going to end this blend off with the new Crackling Campfire. These colors blend together beautifully and they create a really amazing fiery sunset, Halloween, or fall look. Next, I'll spray Pixie Spray to the back of the Just BATTY stencil over my Waffle Flower Water Media Mat, and then I'll place the blended panel down on the overspray to hold it in place, and then I put the stencil down to keep it in place on top of that. Then I'll ink blend the Black Soot Distress Oxide ink on top of the stencil. Once all of the bats are ink blended, I'm going to keep the stencil in place and I'm going to add some shine to a few of the bats. So I grab a palette knife and the Tonic Studios Nuvo Crystal Drops in Ebony. I squeezed some of the drops over one bat and then I used the palette knife to spread it out. I'll do this 2 more times so that I should end up with 3 shiny bats. When I peeled back the stencil, I realized I got some of the drops underneath the stencil on one of the bats. This was totally user error. I was not careful and I used too much of the Nuvo drops and I didn't spread it out evenly. So I decided to replace the stencil and do 1 more bat with the idea that I'm going to cover up the smushed bat with something else on the card. To make a larger bat embellishment for the card, I'm using Thermoweb's double-sided foam adhesive sheets and their black flock transfer sheets. So I cut the foam adhesive down to a rectangle slightly larger than the main bat image. Then I peel off one side of the foam adhesive protective layer and place it right down on the fuzzy side of that flock. Then simply trim the flock down to the size of the adhesive sheet and place your die with the cutting side of the die down on the flock side of that adhesive sandwich there. Run it through your die cut machine, then peel off the top protective layer to reveal the flock foam bat, which is so cute and so much texture to it. I'm going to cut the shadow of the bat out of the double-sided foam without anything adhered or stuck to it. I peel off the top protective layer of that die-cut bat shadow and place it down on my work surface. Place the foil that I want to use, which is orange and really brilliantly beautiful, down on top of the foil and rub it with your finger. The foil color is facing up, facing you. And then when you peel it off, the foil has been transferred to that double-sided foam. Now all we have to do is peel off the back protective layer of our fuzzy flock bat and lay him down on that foiled shadow to create a really fun flocked and foiled embellishment for the card. Now peel off the back protective layer of the foil shadow and just place it down on your card. So you have this really dimensional and textured cool embellishment for your card. Then just place a little bit of tape runner behind the Happy Halloween sentiments strip, and next cut down this panel a little bit because I had some of the bats on the side were a little less inked up than the ones in the center. And so I'm going to mat this down onto some A2 sized black cardstock. And then this card is also done. If you want to check out all these fun new Halloween supplies from CZ Designs at Simon Says Stamp, just look down below in the YouTube description box. I'll have them all listed out along with that new color of Distress Oxide ink. If you love seeing crafty supplies before you buy them, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and be sure to hit the bell so you can be notified anytime I have a new video available. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. While I was